data frame. It's all one data set. And then given that data set, you take variables in your data set and map them to graph features, right? So you might say, this variable is going to be on the x-axis, and this variable is going to be on the y-axis, and this variable is going to tell me what groups there are, and this variable is going to tell me, do I want a panel here or a panel here? This variable is going to tell me color. Everything that you care about is a variable in your data set that get mapped to some feature of a plot, right? And you just sort of say, all right, given this data set, I need to map these variables to these features. Once you've done that, you might think, okay, great, now I have the plot itself. You don't quite yet. The thing that you have to do after that is to say, what kind of a plot do you want to have? Do you want to have a scatter plot? Do you want to have a line plot? Do you want to draw a smooth through the middle of your curves? Do you want to summarize things? Do you want a histogram? Do you want box plots? Whatever it is. But you can then define whatever graph features you want, or sorry, whatever graph elements you want based on the data that you have and the way that you have mapped variables to graph components. You say, all right, here's my variable, here's my graph feature. Now tell me, do I want a histogram? Do I want a scatter plot? Do I want something else? And you can stack up multiple of these geometries given the aesthetics that you've defined. And that's kind of it, right? And I'm sort of saying this a bunch of times because we're going to start building plots in a few minutes, and I'll say, here's my data set, here's how I'm mapping variables onto things, and then here's the geometries that I want to create. And that gets you a very long way in understanding how ggplot works. There are some more advanced features. You can create multiple panels if you're interested in that. You can change like the X scale, you can change your color gradient, you can define a variety of other features. There are things that you can do to make your plots slightly fancier. A lot of those things are not critical though, and so there's a lot that you can do sort of right at the outset to make your graphs work pretty well. And then any graph that you actually want to make is just built by combining different elements. You can come up with different variable mappings, you can come up with different geometries and everything. Everything sort of fits within this framework, and so we'll talk a little bit about that, or we'll see how it goes. Does that sound good? Okay. So, it's doing this again. Okay, so I'm gonna do a similar sort of setting things up as I've done before, and what I mean by that is I'm going to create a new R Markdown document, and the only thing that's going to be in this R Markdown document is stuff for visualization. All right, that's going to be sort of the first thing that I do. The next thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to copy and paste code from the short course website to download a data set that we're going to use. We're not going to like import something. It's going to download directly into RStudio, and we're just going to be able, hopefully to use that. So I'm going to duplicate this data manipulation and call it visualization instead. And then inside of RStudio, I'm going to open up that data visualization, and I'm going to delete everything else. So I have here a blank R Markdown document that I'm going to use for visualization. Okay? All right. So the next thing that I'm going to do is get data from an R package. The data that I'm going to use over here, this is, let me get to the right page, in visualization, is right here. I'm going to copy and paste this whole big chunk of code, and it's going to create a weather data frame, and I'll describe exactly what this weather data frame is in just a second. But again, all of this code is coming from the course website, and it's not super important how it works. It's not super important what this code does. Just keep in mind it's going to use an R package to get data, and we're going to use that to make some plots. All right. Okay. So I've just run that bit of code and downloaded this data set, and I'm going to take a quick look at the beginning part of this at least. Okay, so can folks see this part of the screen? Let me see here. So what I have here is it's not like the most exciting data set. I'm just going to sort of try to use something that we can make some plots around. This is a data set that has daily precipitation and temperature data for 3 weather stations in the United States. One of them is in Central Park, which is in New York. It cold in the winter and hot in the summer. One of them is in Hawaii, which is pretty nice all the year round. And then one of them is in Seattle, which is sort of in between the two. But we've got these 3 weather stations, Central Park and Waikiki in this place called Waterhole. And we've got date 2017, January 1st up to December 31st. And we have the daily precipitation, we have the maximum temperature, and we have the minimum temperature. Okay? And we're going to make some plots of weather data, right? Okay. So, what I'm going to do next is load a couple of packages. I'm going to load the Tidyverse package, and we'll see in a few minutes. I'm going to load this package called GG Ridges. And what I'm going to do now is use ggplot to make a variety of figures based on this data set, okay? And the way I'm going to do this is start out, I have my weather data frame, and I'm going to use this pipe operator that we've seen before. I'm going to take that weather data frame, and I'm going to put it into ggplot, okay? Now, what I'm going to do to start out with is just say I'd like to make a scatter plot, right? And the scatter plot that I'm going to make is pretty boring. I'm going to put T min on the x-axis, the minimum temperature on the x-axis, and I'm going to put the maximum temperature on the y-axis, okay? So the way I'm going to do that inside of ggplot is using this AES piece where I'm defining aesthetic mappings, right? So this is where I take elements of my data set and map them to graph features. And so I want my x-axis, the variable in the weather data frame that maps to the x-axis is T min, and the variable in my data frame that maps onto the y-axis is T max. Okay? And if I just run this bit of code, you'll actually see off to the side a blank scatter plot, right? And basically all I've done here is I've got T min on this axis and T max on this axis, and the range here is actually built around whatever exists in my data set. The minimum temperature is somewhere over here, and the maximum is somewhere over here, but I've just got an empty scatter plot, because what ggplot does, the way that it thinks about things is again, you build up graphs one piece at a time. So the first thing that I've done here is taken my data set, and then I've said, I know what's going to be on the x-axis and I know what's going to be on the y-axis, but I haven't said what kind of a plot I want yet. And the kind of plot that I'm going to put together next is a scatter plot. So I'm going to add a geom point to get a scatter plot. And great, there it is, right? And I think what's handy about this, I know I'm walking through this very slowly, and I've got like a data set, and I've got an x-axis mapping to this and a y-axis mapping to that, and then I put this geometry on there. And the reason that I'm sort of going through this relatively slowly is because once this logic makes sense, it's possible to start making a lot of graphs relatively quickly. And I think that's sort of the stuff that we're going to do next is see, once you know how to make a plot like this, what are the other kinds of things that you might be able to do instead, right? So the first thing that I'm going to do is say, well, let's think about other kinds of aesthetic mappings that we might care about. What are other kinds of plots that we might want to make? And I'm going to take my weather data frame, and I'm going to take a new ggplot, and I'm going to say, but still on the x-axis have T min, and on the y-axis have T max. That's right. And I'll do geom point again. But now I'm going to define another aesthetic. I'm going to say that I want color to come from one of the variables in my data set. I want color to come, let's say, from, what are my variables here? Let's go with the name, right? So now my name variable is mapping onto the aesthetics. I have a nice legend off to the side. You see, the Waterhole is down here, Central Park is over here, and Waikiki is over here, right? This is, let me see. Right, so this is the plot that I'm able to make now. Right, you can also, I want to be clear, you can add things like other geometries. So one of the things that you might want to do is to not just have a scatter plot, but to have like a smooth curve going through the middle of your scatter plot. And you can do that. There's a nice geometry for that. You can have geom smooth running through the middle of this. And now if I check my plot over here, let me see. If you look closely, you can see there's this sort of blue curve running through the middle of things. And there's a red curve, I don't know if you can see, there's a red curve here and a green curve up here. And just to sort of like drive this point home, that what ggplot is doing is taking a data set and the aesthetic mappings, and then you build up pieces one at a time. You don't, if you wanted to say, I have a scatter plot, you don't have to have that scatter plot. If all you want to see is the smooth curve, this is also a completely well-defined plot, right, that has taken some data set, mapped this onto the x-axis and this onto the y-axis, and now the geometry that I care about is the smooth curve running through the middle of it. So there are a variety of different ways that you can take one data set and stack geometries up on top of them. You can put multiple things together if you'd like to. You can put one at a time. You can sort of make this work however you want it to. Does that make sense? Good? Rahel, good? Good. Okay. There are, I think there are a couple of helpful options in here. So one of the things that I'm going to do in this geom point, there are some graph features that don't necessarily have to come from other variables. You can sort of define some parts of this without doing an aesthetic mapping. So I'm going to define here an alpha blending. Alpha blending makes points more or less transparent. So I'm going to say let's set an alpha level to 0.2. It's a graph feature, not like a p-value threshold. So now here I'm making the same plot that I had made before. It's a scatter plot. The points are a little bit transparent, and you can see the curves that are running through the middle of this a little bit more clearly because I've made the individual data points somewhat transparent. Let me just check over here. What are some of the other plots? Color, smooth. All right. So the next thing that I'm going to talk about is creating multiple panels, right? And so one of the ways that you might want to go about creating multiple panels here is to say, I actually, in this, let me see if I can find it. In this figure, I've got 3 weather stations, and all of those data points are overlaid on top of each other. And that's a little bit difficult to see everything that's going on. If I wanted to have 3 panels, I need to create separate facets. And there's a nice little function that goes along with this. I'm going to do Facet Grid. And I want to wrap everything with respect to name as well. And so let me see if this works. Right. So now I've got the same basic figure in each of these panels. And the figure has the T-min is on the x-axis, T-max is on the y-axis. I'm making a scatter plot in each of these, and I've got the smooth curve running through the middle. But I've now created 3 separate panels for each of the figures or each of the weather stations that I care about, right? So again, I'm sort of taking one basic plot and then adding elements one piece at a time to come up with a graph of increasing complexity, okay? Just to sort of, let's take a look at another one of these plots. I'm going to start in much the same way. I'm going to take my weather data frame, and instead of mapping T-min to the x-axis, just to sort of show that, you change one variable and you get different graphs. If instead of having T-min on the x-axis, I want date on the x-axis, this will show sort of the T-max over the course of the year. And I'm going to keep color according to name. I'm going to keep the rest of this the same. I'm going to take a look. Now I can sort of see what the annual trajectory of temperatures looks like in each of these places. Where again, I've just sort of said date should be on the x-axis, T-max is on the y-axis. I've got a scatter plot with a smooth curve running through the middle, and I'm sort of getting these data features. I'm going to add, just because you can, I'm going to add here that the size should be drawn from the precipitation variable. And let's take a look at the resulting plot here. So precipitation sort of gives you some idea about like how much rain or snowfall there was in a particular time. And one of the things that's nice about this figure is that you can see here over in Waterhole, this is near Seattle, it rains a lot in the winter and it's relatively cool. Central Park, it sort of rains more or less throughout the year. Waikiki, it doesn't rain all that much at all, but occasionally, right? So again, like I'm just taking variables and I'm mapping variables to features of the plots that I care about and then defining the geometries that matter beyond that. Sound good? Again, like one of the things that I like about this a lot is that it makes it possible to make a lot of different graph types relatively quickly. And so the next couple of things that I'm going to take a look at is a few other kinds of graphs that you might want to make given a data set that looks like this. Okay, so let me just sort of double check I'm covering this.
Can you say that's the chord?
What's that?
Can you say that's the chord? The chord.
The chord?
The chord. The alchord. The code.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Can I send? Yeah, so that's a good question. One of the things that I guess maybe Isabel will ask you to do, when we're done today, I'll create a zip folder of the directory that I've been using, and we can send it to everybody so you can see all of the code that I've written and open up your own art project and like see whether or not everything works. Yeah, definitely. All right, so I guess like the next thing that I'm going to try to do is create a variety of histograms, right? So we've made scatter plots and we've sort of put these two things together. So let's do a univariate plot. So if I wanted to make a histogram, starting from my weather data frame, I'm going to put this into ggplot, and I'm going to define an aesthetic mapping where what I want to have on the x-axis is, I'm still going to stick with, say, Tmax, right? And now instead of creating a scatter plot, I want to create a histogram. And great, there is a histogram of all of the Tmax variables in my data set. Again, the only thing that I had to change here, I had to keep track of my aesthetic mappings, that's part of it, but then I had to define which geometry I care about, and I was able to do that as well. So here, I can then update this if I wanted, say, instead of a histogram where I put everything together, I can use that same trick I had before where I facet grid against name. And now I have a plot with 3 separate histograms, one for each of the locations that I care about. There are some other aesthetics that you can define here. You can make these histograms have different colors if you're interested, right? So if I wanted to, for example, fill in my histogram according to the name variable, you can do that. Let's see, here we go. I think those are the main things that you might care about here. You can do, alpha equals 0.2 to make, 0.2. To make this a little bit more transparent in the way that we did elsewhere. Sometimes these are relevant, sometimes it's a little bit less so. But again, the sort of point that I'm making is all of the things that we used when we needed to make a scatter plot work if you're making a histogram as well. If you wanted to, for example, make a box plot, let's try this. Weather data frame, I'm going to do ggplot. And now I'm going to say on the y-axis, I want to have Tmax. And let's look at geom box plot. Stat box plot. Let's say x is equal to name and y is equal to, what am I doing wrong here? Oh, I know what I did. All right, so first I've got a box plot that shows all of the distribution of Tmax values. If I put on the x-axis the name variable, then I get a separate box plot for each of the groups that I care about. I could probably facet in some other ways. There are other things that you can do if you wanted to have a box plot if you're really interested in that. But again, you can sort of stack some of these things up. I think for a while people were really interested in, let's take a look at violin plots, right? Part of the reason that people like these violin plots is that if you look at half of this, it's a density plot. You can sort of say, right, it sort of actually shows a little bit more about the overall data distribution. You get, that there's a real spike here and then it sort of tapers here, and this is maybe a little bit more asymmetric in the other direction. Violin plots are sort of like a way of thinking about density plots, and put differently. If you wanted to make a density plot, again, I'm just going to set up and make some plots. We take our weather data frame and use ggplot. Again, AES X is Tmax. And let's do geom density and facet grid against name. And now you have a nice density plot showing the distribution of Tmax temperatures in each location. Okay. Let's see. Good. So I think I always have a hard time looking at density plots like this. And so there is, this was, believe it or not, I think this was a very trendy plot a couple of years ago, a ridge plot. And it's sort of as a way of stacking up these densities. So I'm going to take a ggplot and put on the x-axis Tmax, and I think this is y is name. And then I'm going to do gg ridges. Geom density ridges, there it is. Right, so this is potentially a way of putting those three densities onto the same collection of axes. Makes it, I think, a little bit easier to compare the overall distribution across each of these. Again, handy way to make a plot. All of it sort of fits within the overall logic of doing a ggplot framework, where you take your data frame, you define your aesthetic mappings, and then describe what geometry you're interested in. Sound good? Okay. I've got, I mean, like, I can talk a lot more, maybe, about some of the features that go into ggplot or making plot objects like this, but it's hard to know how helpful that's going to be, especially at this point in the day and this point in the afternoon. So what do folks think? Are there questions about ggplot? Anything here that's like particularly confusing? Yes?
How do you use it to create a heat map?
How do you use it to create a heat map? Oh. I have to connect to the internet. Let's see. Here we go. So ggplot2 heat map. Yeah, so there's this geontile function. It's been a while since I've taken a. Let's see real quick. So this example that I just downloaded from the internet. Let's view this data set. It's created two things. I've got an x variable and a y variable, and then a z variable. And the way that this is organized is that you go from A to T for y variable 1, and then from A to T for y variable 2. And each of those has like a z variable that goes along with it. And taking a look at this, the way that ggplot, the way that ggplot is going to work here to create this heat map is to take the data set and put it into ggplot, and then map the x variable in my data frame onto the x-axis of my heat map. It's going to map the y variable in my data frame to the y variable in my heat map, and it's going to fill in the tiles according to whatever that z variable is, and then it's going to define geontile to go along with that. And there it is, right? I've got on the x-axis A to T, on the y-axis 1 to 20. I've sort of taken things in my data set and mapped them. That's what I want on x, that's what I want on y. Each unique combination has a particular z value that went along with it, and it has filled that in according to this heat map. Yeah. Good? Yep. Yeah, so again, like, I hardly ever make heat maps. It just doesn't come up in the work that I do. But actually, I like this question because it drives home that there is a clear logic to how ggplot is supposed to work. That you have your data set, and then to make a plot, you have to know, well, how does this data set map onto a particular graph feature, and then what is the geometry that I need to make on top of that? And there you go. Yeah. What else? Any other questions? All right, so I think we're going to call it done on the short course. I think we'll distribute all of the materials. I'll ask Isabel to send everything around. I hope this has been at least useful as a way of thinking about, the tools are out there, and hopefully that they would be useful in coming up with the courses, integrating into courses as we start developing the master's programs down the road. But hopefully, again, like I hope that this has been useful for folks. So thanks very much. I did my best to get us back on track.
So folks, at this point in time, if I can have your attention so that we can have a start recording. At this point in time, we're supposed to have a break. We're a little bit behind, but I don't see the coffee here yet. So we're just taking away the lunch. One thing we can do is actually we can go straight to case studies. And for the most part, it's going to be watching videos because there are 2 case studies that have been recorded. And then, if there is time, we are also going to tell you a little bit about the GeoHealth Hub and the data structure between myself, Balai, and Otieno when he comes. So maybe we can just start in terms of what the guidelines are in terms of how you have to think about the videos. Do at least 1 or 2, and if coffee shows up, we'll break and then come back and finish. Are people okay with that, or?
Yes, and Ida and myself need 5 minutes of the group time.
Okay. For what?
Later,
Okay.
we have something to do.
Okay. So you want to do it now, or?
We can do it, or later? Yeah.
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
So we'd like to have Professor Balai and Patrick.
Okay. Okay. So you're being called, I don't know what it is about, so.
Oh ya በፊቱ በጣም ፕሮግራም ጋር ነገ ይገራል
How did this work? It seemed like it was really simple.
ሃይዲቨርስን እንዲያል በቃ ችግር የሚወጣው እሱ ነው።
There you go.
አዎ በደም አዲስ ስቱዲዮ ስቱዲዮን ምን
Oh, great.
ምክንያቱም ምንድነው አሁን ድሮ ጥጫና አለ እኮ ሀያ ምናምን ግን ኮምፒውተሩ ስፒድ እንዲቀንስ ያደርጋል።
ማትጠቀም በሙሉ አንስተራል።
እግረ መንገድ ስሩ እንዲተጭነው ስለነበረ ሌላም ስልኬን እሱን አታጠፋም። አንተና መጣ ከዛ መጠቀጣ
ይሄ ሰርታ
አረፉ የሚፈልገው ፕሮግራሙ ኦልሞስት የተወሰነ ምን ይሰራል የሚለው ካወቅኩ በኋላ በየባቸው
በጣም እንትን ነው ፍሌክሲብል
ፍሌክሲብል ከዛ በኋላ ራስህ እንትን ትለዋለህ
እየለመድክ ትሄዳለህ።
ከዛ ይሄን ባረገው እዚህ ላይ ብጨምርበት እንዲሆናል እንዲሆናል
This one is for the other.
So Professor Balai can take down the words and show them in action what it means. The first one?
The first one is
change the
But
word.
you have to tell them first what the word was.
First one is Zuri.
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 Zuri means
Zuri means
Turn up.
turn around. And then what?
abari.
Bari is change her away.
That's good.
That's enough.
You're all learning Amharic now.
Let me tell you the exact same meaning in Swahili. Abari means
How are you?
and Zuri means
Abali means how are you or hi.
and Zuri means
Nzuri means good or fine.
yeah. So they have exactly the opposite meaning.
Am I done?
Abari means chase her away, chase them away.
Enough.
And Zuri means you can shoot.
Wow. Abali Professor Belay. Nzuri sana.
No, actually, what happened is like in the morning, I was talking to Rahel and I was teaching her something in Kiswahili. So I told her, okay, the word is habari. When I said habari, she looked at me. I was wondering what have I said. She looked at me, habari. You know, like, that's what she said. What did you say again? So that's why we said, let's use this word. Yeah. Thank you.
So I'm just asking, how do we translate this to data science? Does that mean what you're writing out means positive SAS or something?
Exactly.
Okay, so is that very interesting innovation? Right? We're going to move on. Okay, so we're going to continue and then probably we'll break at some point. But this is the part where we talk about case studies. And so first we're going to show 3 videos. One was prepared by Dan Westerberg, who is the PI of CAMSNet and the Department of State project. Another one is made by Darwin Jack, who is going to talk about some studies from Ghana that actually could have real science applications. And the third one is going to be from Jessica Justman from ICAM. This is on infectious diseases and the health systems and things like that. And then depending on time, between myself, Balai, and probably OKM, if it comes in time, we're going to tell you a little bit about the geohealth and data structures. So it's really a very simple, setup. Once we watch each video, we're going to stop and probably we're just going to have a free-flowing discussion about what are the salient features of the video, what are the goals and objectives of the case study or studies, what are the design features, what kind of data structure are we talking about, and then maybe have a discussion, since we are a room of biostatisticians, information scientists and public health specialists, what kind of potential analytic approach will be used for this kind of data. And then what's the potential for using these studies or case studies as a source of practical projects for the public health data science issues. This is basically what we're going to do with each one. So it's not as, maybe not complicated, it's not as involved or challenging as the one that Jeff has been doing, so, and it's not as entertaining as Yabari and Zuri. Somewhere in between. By the way, we have a dog and her name is Zuri. It was taken from the Swahili word, not from Yabari. Okay, so I'm going to stop this and then we're just going to watch the video together. My guess is actually some of you might have already watched it. Okay, so let me use this full screen.
My name is Dan Westerville, assistant professor at the Law Observatory at Columbia University, and I'll be talking about a project that is related to the pre-SC.
How many of you have watched the videos already? Okay.
Yes, team. And I'll be talking about we take two sets of data, take a set of particulate matter data from a reference monitor or a regulatory grade, research grade monitor, and also take data from a low cost sensor, which are cheaper and the data quality is less good. And so this tutorial and also this app basically we'll take those two data sets and compare them side by side, and then use that comparison to develop a very simple multiple linear regression technique that corrects the low-cost sensor data closer towards the high-quality data standard, which is the reference monitor data. So basically, we'll look these two data sets, and it'll sort of, you just click, compile and analyze, and it will spit out your correction factors and your comparisons, and you can actually see, using some, you can also look at the code, we are basically doing the linear regression kind of behind the scenes, and then you can, take your output and go from there. So it's a very useful, simple tool for people that are interested in using low-cost sensors. Obviously, very relevant to data science. We also do a lot of capacity building in terms of training, more traditional types of training. For example, we did the air quality science management in East Africa certificate program, which was funded also by the U.S. State Department. And we did this from July 26th to July 30th of this last year, online only. We had about 100 attendees from East Africa. We gave out a certificate, which you can see down there. Basically, we had a week straight of kind of intense courses regarding different topics on air pollution, whether it was just general introduction to measurement techniques, modeling techniques, health-related studies for air quality, policy-related studies for air quality were covered as well. So we're continuing this, and we have more kind of on the docket coming up soon. We're also doing a lot of data collection, and so this map of Africa on the right shows some of the cities that I'm currently working in. And of course, I'll highlight what's going on in East Africa, particularly in Nairobi, Kenya. To our knowledge, we have put in the first reference monitor for nitrogen dioxide and nitrogen oxides in general, so NOx, in Nairobi, Kenya. It's located at the Kenyatta University City Center campus, kind of right in the heart of the central business you need to be able to do some comparison or add some correction back there. So very simple methods like linear regression. We have in particular explored this Gaussian mixture regression, which we find to be very useful as a probabilistic method that involves the Gaussian mixture model using the probabilities from these Gaussian mixture models to develop a series of different regressions to basically predict output data from a series of different inputs. So you can find more on that in the paper here that I have at the bottom, the application of Gaussian mixture regression for the correction of low-cost PM2.5 modeling data in the cloud data. One thing that we would like to extend this work is on applying these correction factors more universally and seeing if there's a way that we can bypass the issue of having to have specific co-location in each spot. So there's thousands and thousands of low-cost sensors around the world, and it's not exactly practical to always do a long-term co-location with that expensive reference monitor in every location, especially in places where resources are limited. So we're looking to sort of build and train a model that spans the parameter space enough in order to be globally or at least sub-globally applicable. And we find that the Gaussian mixture regression approach is a useful tool for that. One other possible avenue for data science is sort of chemical transport model or air pollution model, air quality modeling. And that's one of the things we're doing. And this is some output from the GEOS CF weather composition forecasting weather forecast model compared to band 1020 PM2.5 in red. This is again across data, and you can see the blue is the model predictions for PM2.5 from April 2021 to October 2021. So red is the observations. You can see that the model and the observations actually track each other pretty well. So for a fairly coarse resolution model, this is rather encouraging results. So, there's a lot of potential here for using this data in different data science techniques. So I think I'll just summarize here and say that low-cost sensors can be very helpful, but it's vital to make sure we're getting good data out of them, and there's a lot of data science possibilities for making that happen. So thank you for listening.
Yeah, so that's a very nice description, at least for a snapshot of what the CompsNet network data in the Department of State project, which, as you know, was a partner project for AFRIA DST. In fact, some of the graphics that he was showing, I'm sure, were used, done using digital or something like that. So it's kind of, things, science in action, using the tools that we have been talking about today. Any comments? Any reflections? So kind of the guiding principles, what the study is all about, and how it can inform AFRIA DST, the nature of the data, the kind of modeling techniques. In fact, to some extent he has already said it in terms of what they were using. Middle afternoon. I think Jeff has tired you. Jeff has taken on this. So one thing that the video mentioned is the calibration issue, and also the use of these low-cost sensors, which are really ubiquitous. I think they could deal with, they could lead to a huge volume of data, but they are not going to be of the highest quality, right? On the other hand, we have very limited information from much higher quality and standard, equipment, which are very expensive, and they are going to be far apart both in time and volume and also space, right? So one of the challenge is actually how to harmonize the data and how to use all available information in order to come up with better estimates of exposure, both for those areas where measurements were made, but also for areas that measurements were not made, right? So this issue of calibration is essentially, in terms of improving estimation based on gold standard data, but extending it, to the lower quality data based, estimates. So that's very, very typical in environmental research, and I think towards the end, the chemical transport data was mentioned. Maybe could have included, satellite data as well. So machine learning actually is being used over and over again in terms of using what we call this ensemble type modeling techniques in order to come up with much better estimates by using multiple modeling techniques and summarizing information. So I think probably as the students, get acquainted with, the fundamental principles of biostatistics, public health, concepts, and then machine learning techniques, then, they will be ready to handle, either this kind of complexity, but even more complexity in the data. So that's the whole point. That's why the CAMSNet project and the Department of State project are partners, and that's why the case study is actually relevant to what was discussed today as basics of data science, but even to feature trainings both in the EMS and also the short-term trainings. Any other comments? Yeah, right.
Maybe I missed it. Maybe I can try to short. I was saying maybe I missed it. This is data with a lot of noise and missing values, right? I'm saying this, they were dealing with pieces of data with lots of noise and lots of missing values. I missed on how they dealt with that problem, like how precisely they deal with that problem.
So for the high quality reference equipment, you have high quality data, right? But from the low cost sensors, you're going to get a lot of data from many more locations, but we are not going to be the standard quality or the high quality standard data, right? So I think the way you do calibration is you will have both measurements in certain locations, so you will have the ability to compare and come up with with regression estimates, in terms of how the two are related, and you exploit that information in order to correct what you would get from the lower quality data. So it's not really missing; it's actually missing by design. But you're trying to, use limited high quality information to get better quality information for the areas or the times or the places that you don't have the high quality data. So that's the calibration is actually where the improvement is coming from. Tiffany, this is in your alley actually, yeah. So you missed most of the video, but if you have any more comments, actually.
I mean, I think these methods are very common. Sorry. I don't have much to add. I just want to say that environmental data, which is something I'm very much working with, and I think probably where many of the practicum or projects might come out of, it's very common to have sort of like you were saying, this noisy, messy data. But finding sort of two data sets that can merge together to inform one another is really important and something to use and embrace the sort of the chaos to find something even better. So yeah, it's a great plan. This is a really wonderful project.
Yeah, I think this is a perfect example actually where training or projects like the one we have actually could be very helpful, right? So all of a sudden the world has the ability to collect a lot of information using local sensors. Because in the past, when people had to rely on high quality and very expensive equipment, they are almost absent completely from Sub-Saharan Africa. That could change. But just using that local sensor data by itself also, because it comes with a lot of noise, then it's not going to be as useful. But with the right skill set and very strategically measured high quality and low quality data, you can actually improve the quality of the data and, relate it to health and, have findings that are very relevant to on the ground, primary data so that the policy could be based on local information, right? So that's basically, how you can see or you can validate, the need for the skill set in being able to actually handle this kind of data, basically, right?
I suppose since it's not around to answer, it can help us. I'm just wondering, the data that is being collected, I've seen, I think it's nitrogen oxide or something.
One of the examples was nitrogen, yeah.
But I don't see carbon dioxide, and I think that is one of the main concerns there. I've also seen that there's a regression model, so I wonder what value they are trying to predict. Then the done comment is about the consumers of this information. Generally, we tend to think of government as the main consumer or other government departments. So I'm wondering, this kind of information, who will consume it? The stakeholders rather than maybe academic admissions.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. So for the first question, I think, I'm not sure what they are measuring. I think the video talked about PM and nitrogen dioxide. That doesn't mean they are not measuring carbon dioxide or other things. These are just supposed to be examples. For the second one, in terms of what they are using in order to, what they are trying to predict. In this case, it's not to predict one pollutant basis on another. It's basically the same pollutant or the same variable for, in general terms, but the same variable is measured with a lot of noise in a lot of places versus the same pollutant being measured in a few places but with high precision, right? So the whole point is about how do you increase or improve the precision of the many places based on this gold standard information that you have on the limited number of spaces, right? So you're trying to increase the precision of your measurements across the board so that you have much richer data that you can use, right? So that's the whole point about at least this example that on calibration that people are using. In terms of who the consumers are, so you can have many layers of consumers, right? At the very least, it could be an air quality management district. I think in this case, NAMA, right? Is it NAMA, right, in Kenya? Yeah. So they could actually use this kind of techniques in order to inform the public what the trend of pollution has been or what it will be or even on a daily basis. Health researchers could take that data and relate it to health. So it could be academic exercise, but at the same time it could inform whether any pollutant is actually affecting health, human health or animal health, it doesn't matter. Eventually, the public is going to be the consumer for that information, but the government, policymakers are also going to be the consumers to take that information and then translate it to policy. Like if, air pollutant like PM is causing a lot of health effects, then they would like to pinpoint the sources, hopefully, and try to regulate those sources in order to bring the pollution level down, right? So in terms of consumer, it's many, many layers, actually. So hopefully that has answered all your questions.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Good, so maybe we can move on and show the other two videos. But let me see if I'm monitoring our coffee. So, is coffee ready? Nothing. Okay, so we'll do another video. So the next one is going to be from Darby Jack.
Hello, my name is Darby Jack. I'm an associate professor at Columbia University in the Department of Environmental Sciences. Along with doctoral student Ms. Beth Dowda, I'll be sharing a brief data science case study drawn from recent work that aimed to combine personal air pollution measurements, community-level measurements, and central site measurements to generate long-term estimates for personal air pollution exposures. Ms. Beth and I carried out this work in the context of an ongoing cohort study in Ghana, in West Africa. There we worked very closely with the Kintampo Health Research Center, which has an absolutely world-class environmental health team. The work occurs in the context of the GRASS cohort. GRASS stands for the Ghana Randomized Air Pollution and Health Study. This was a randomized controlled trial wherein we randomized pregnant mothers to a control arm or to clean cook stove arms. The original GRASS study focused on birth weight and pneumonia up through the first year of life. We've continued to follow the cohort, and the children are now 8 years old. We have personal air pollution measurements and air pollution data from community monitors and central site monitors. We also have information on community and individual characteristics and on meteorology. The goal of the analysis was to figure out how to combine the data and best approximate long-term exposures, personal exposures, for use in epidemiological analysis. Here we illustrate the community monitors. These are PM2.5 monitors that collect minute resolution data and that stay in the communities for weeks at a time. I also illustrate the personal monitors, which are miniaturized wearable PM2.5 monitors. Again, these collect minute resolution data. Both types of instruments generate time series. In the case of the central site monitor, which is similar to the community monitors, the time series are quite long. We have years of minute resolution data. The goal of the current research is to relate these household air pollution exposures to lung function trajectories in both mothers and in children. Here we see one of the study mothers undergoing impulse oscillometry, which is a method for testing lung function using sound waves. I also want to underscore that this research is part of a broad effort that my group is undertaking in close partnership with colleagues at the Kintampo Health Research Center, which is part of the Ghana Ministry of Health, and also in partnership with the Ghana Ministry of Energy to build up the knowledge base for clean household energy transitions in Ghana. This particular work helps us quantify the risk from household air pollution, which in turn serves to justify policy. Other work that my group is undertaking is explicitly focused on behavioral and economic dimensions of clean energy transitions. I'll now turn it over to Ms. Beth to describe in more detail the analysis workflow.
The overall goal of this analysis was to use short-term measurements of PM2.5 and use those in combination with other sources of information to predict long-term exposure to PM2.5 for study participants, which included mothers and their children. So now let's look at what data we had available to get started. So in terms of PM2.5 measure,
It's maximum.
Is the volume on YouTube maximized?
which included mothers and their
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Darby Jack. I'm an associate professor at Clemson, which in turn serves to justify policy. Other work that my group is undertaking is explicitly focused on behavioral and economic dimensions of clean energy transitions. I'll now turn it over to Ms. Beth to describe in more detail the analysis workflow.
The overall goal of this analysis was to use short-term measurements of PM2.5 and use those in combination with other sources of information to predict long-term exposure to PM2.5 for study participants, which included mothers and their children. So now let's look at what data we had available to get started. So in terms of PM2.5 measurements, we had repeated short-term measurements in mothers and children, and also repeated overlapping short-term measurements in each community. At the central site, we had continuous monitoring of PM2.5 throughout the study period. This led to solid data sets. The first one had 28,000 hourly observations, the second 11,000, and the third 17,000. The next step was to clean the sensor-derived data sets, which required to be corrected, as well as cleaned for negative value or implausible value. We also applied the student criteria to ensure the validity of our measurements. We then next computed daily averages to reduce the dimensionality of our dataset, and then also computed moving averages to ensure that the dataset could be merged based on date but also on time. This led to the measurement. The first one was a merge between community regions, with local exposure between 2.5, and the second had central site information in 2.5.
It might work here.
Use short-term measurements of
connection, I guess.
Let's see that probably speakable here.
Yeah, yeah.
Hello, my name is Darby Jack. I'm an associate professor at Columbia.
I think the laptop itself needs coffee, I guess. I think it's a network issue.
Can you connect to these kind of speakers? Like a Bluetooth
Oh,
speaker?
maybe, yeah.
There you go.
Hello, my name is Jessica Justin.
From the laptop. Yeah, from the laptop.
Yeah, probably. I think video ora sono sarete. Nella cassetta. This one works.
Hello, my name is Jessica Justin. I'm the Senior Technical Director.
Okay, so we'll go to the third video, and hopefully the connection will be better, then you come back to the kind of study, right? Because this one is working now, so we'll just go ahead and go with it. The copy is ready? Yeah, let's do this one. You mean coffee? Let's do this.
Why don't we take a quick coffee break?
Yeah, let's do a coffee and then come back. Just give it a time. Yeah, let's try it.
Just play it. Just sample from our work here at ICANN. Let us take a moment to explain explained ICAP to you. ICAP is a global health organization at Columbia's Mailman School of Public Health, established in 2003. We work through collaborations at every level, national governments, district.
Okay, so start it? No, just continue. It is playing.
Routine service delivery through tailored technical assistance and implementation support. We have conducted meaningful research.
All right, so we'll leave it there and then we'll come back after talking.
Okay, let's grab some coffee and then we'll come back.
should work, but it's disconnected here. Yeah, it should be working from the computer, right? We don't know what's going on.
The system is working. What about this? Is it not there by any means?
Yeah, there is no, that's what I was checking. There is no other player.
They're just in the OLW folder. They have the programs.
Yeah, everyone has a video, so.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. So let's try that, yeah. We're going to use another computer. How is it? Oh, can you just play it the way it is? No, before we do that. I don't know, maybe slow connection for you as well? Yeah.
I'll see if I can get a better connection. Let's see if I can get Yes.
Visualization page.
Yes.
How come you had yellow and this?
So do you want me to restart the video or continue from where we were?
Just continue. Oh, you want to restart?
Let's restart.
Restart? Okay.
To combine personal air pollution measurements, community level measurements, and central site measurements to generate long-term estimates of personal air pollution exposures. Beth and I carried out this work in the context of an ongoing cohort study in Ghana, in West Africa. There we work very closely with the Kintampo Health Research Center, which has an absolutely world-class environmental health team. The work occurs in the context of the GRAPS cohort. GRAPS stands for the Ghana Randomized Air Pollution and Health Study. This was a randomized controlled trial wherein we randomized pregnant mothers to a control arm or to clean cook stove arms. The original GRAPS study focused on birth weight and pneumonia up through the first year of life. We've continued to follow the cohort, and the children are now 8 years old. We have personal air pollution measurements and air pollution data from community monitors and central site monitors. We also have information on community and individual characteristics and on meteorology. The goal of the analysis was to figure out how to combine the data and best approximate long-term exposures, personal exposures, for use in epidemiological analysis. Here we illustrate the community monitors. These are PM2.5 monitors that collect minute resolution data and that stay in the communities for weeks at a time. I also illustrate the personal monitors, which are miniaturized wearable PM2.5 monitors. Again, these collect minute resolution data. Both types of instruments generate time series. In the case of the central site monitor, which is similar to the community monitors, the time series are quite long. We have years of minute resolution data. The goal of the current research is to relate these household air pollution exposures to lung function trajectories in both mothers and in children. Here we see one of the studied mothers undergoing impulse oscillometry, which is a method for testing lung function using sound waves. I also want to underscore that this research is part of a broad effort that my group is undertaking in close partnership with colleagues at the Kintampo Health Research Center, which is part of the Ghana Ministry of Health, and also in partnership with the Ghana Ministry of Energy to build up the knowledge base for clean household energy transitions in Ghana. This particular work helps us quantify the risk from household air pollution, which in turn serves to justify policy. Other work that my group is undertaking is explicitly focused on behavioral and economic dimensions of clean energy transitions. I'll now turn it over to Ms. Beth to describe in more detail the analysis workflow.
The overall goal of this analysis was measurements of PM2.5 and use those in combination with other sources of information to predict long-term exposure to PM2.5 for study participants, which included mothers and their children. So now let's look at what data we have available to get started. So in terms of PM2.5 measurements, we have repeated short-term measurements in mothers and children, and also repeated overlapping short-term measurements in each community. At the central site, we had continuous monitoring of PM2.5 throughout the study period. This led to 4 large data sets. The first one had 28,000 hourly observations, the second 11,000, and the third 17,000. The next step was to clean the sensor-derived data sets, which required to be collected, as well as cleaned for negative value or implausible values. We also applied exclusion criteria to ensure the validity of our measurements. We then next computed daily averages to reduce the dimensionality of our data set, and then also computed moving averages to ensure that the data sets could be merged based on date but also on time. This led to 2 data sets. The first one was a merge between community ambient and personal exposure to PM2.5, and the second had central site and community ambient PM2.5 merged. These data sets were a lot more manageable, with 760 daily observations for data set 1 and 275 for data set 2. So we considered different modeling approaches, but here I'll be showing you the one we ended up selecting. So in green here, you're looking at the continuous central site monitoring of PM2.5, in blue the community ambient monitoring, and in purple the short-term personal exposure measurements. So what we attempted to do was to fit community ambient PM2.5 using central site PM2.5, and then predict long-term community ambient. Similarly, using model 2, we fit the 48-hour personal exposure measurements and use that to predict long-term exposure to PM2.5. So now moving on to our monitoring framework. 48-hour personal exposure measurements and use that to predict load.
Yes, I just wanted to pause here actually, probably, since we're going to come back a little bit later. So this is kind of a cascaded modeling strategy, right? So you have the central site monitoring, which is probably going to be at one location or two locations, but it's continuous. So 17,000, 22,000 hourly measurements were probably coming from that. And then you have the community ambient monitoring. So this might be a little bit more spatially, resolved, but in a limited fashion. So model 1 actually was dealing with predicting, kind of filling gaps, and then later on you have the 48-hour personal measurement. So it's going to be like 1 or 2 at the community level, so multiple communities, and then you have at the personal level. But because it's very expensive and time consuming, you only have 48-hour kind of campaigns, right? So the idea is to basically combine all these sources of data that are being done at personal, community, and then central, and then how to harmonize them and how to use them collectively. So just I wanted you to keep that in mind as we move forward when we come back to it.
Term exposure to PM2.5. So now moving on to our monitoring framework. For each model, either at the community level or for each participant, we started with an empty model with a random intercept. We then increased complexity by adding variables that could explain some of the variability, and then collected a Lee-Bernard cross-validation to assess the model's predicting ability. To do that, we split each dataset into a training set where one observation was left out, and then a testing set that had that one observation that was left out from the training set. We then used the trained model to predict the response value for the left out observation, and here our response value was daily PM2.5, and then we repeated this n times, n being the number of observations in each dataset, whether it was a community dataset or the personal exposure dataset. And finally, we used the lowest RMSE, so the root mean square error, as our selection criteria for the best performing model. So now let's focus on the takeaways that were of interest here. First, we concluded that it was feasible to predict long-term exposure to PM using short-term measurements. We came up with parsimonious models, but they do require a complete set of 3 overlapping measurements, as well as a computation of random intercepts, which necessitates at least 2 observations per participant or community, which is also data intensive. In the future, we think that machine learning might be able to help expand and generalize this approach, including variables that we may not have considered in this approach.
Okay, so that's another example, which is very similar to what we saw before from Dan, but there are one major difference is actually in Dan's video, it was purely about exposure, right? Here this study is an intervention study that's also over time, longitudinal, but it's comparing traditional cook stoves with clean energy cook stoves. And the idea is to see how using clean energy cook stoves could actually improve women's health or children's health. But as you saw, the exposure campaign actually had different levels of kind of complexity or coverage in terms of space between personal, community, and central level. So at the end, they said, in the future, we'd like to use machine learning methods in order to increase prediction. That's kind of loosely left, but what we have done so far is actually kind of quote-unquote traditional modeling techniques for exposure modeling, and eventually to use with health data. Anyway, so I should have let you tell me all this, but any reflections? Before we move on to the third example, which is slightly different, which is going to be on health systems or infectious disease.
Yeah. Okay, so I think at the beginning of the presentation, it was mentioned that they were also looking at lung function and child and health, some of the child and health indicators. Has that been included in the analysis?
Not in this video, but the study itself has been running for many, many years.
Yeah.
And we have published extensively on maternal and child mortality. Sorry, health. So for the woman, the lung function measurement was one of the main outcomes. I think for children, it could have been something else. I know they have some ambulatory blood pressure measurements, so both on the child and the woman.
I think now they're, the children were just born a few years ago, so now they're following up the children and looking at lung function using an interesting method.
Yeah. And in fact, they have already done some measurements, and I know that they're just about to be funded to continue this cohort. In fact, I'm part of that team, so I know. But I think that's got some good score to continue measurement. So there will be rich longitudinal data over time on the children and the woman and the mothers, and then the exposure side of it is also the other side of the complexity. So the data sets, they are going to increase in complexity and volume. And of course, that's probably why they are saying probably we need machine learning techniques in order to improve upon our exposure modeling techniques. Any other comment on this before we move on to the next one? Okay. All right, so why don't we move on to the next one?
Hello, my name is Jessica Justin. I'm the Senior Technical Director at ICAP at Columbia, and I'm very pleased to be able to describe to you a few practical examples from our work here at ICAP. Let me just take a moment to explain ICAP to you. ICAP is a global health organization at Columbia's Mailman School of Public Health, established in 2003. And we work through collaborations at every level of the health system with national governments, district health management teams, individual health facilities, local educational institutions, and non-governmental organizations. Our core approaches inform our activities. As you can see with the circle on your right, we support routine service delivery through tailored technical assistance and implementation support. We help conduct meaningful research. We support effective education and training for capacity building. And we conduct rigorous surveillance and impact assessments to evaluate the impact of public health programs. ICAP works in over 30 countries, and the images on this slide gives you a sense of the wide range of technical and management areas that ICAP supports. In addition, we have opportunities for students to do next generation internship projects, and I thought I would describe one of them to you that was conducted this past summer. This particular list shows a list of all of the next generation internship projects, and I've put the ICAP website at the bottom of the slide where you can get more information by clicking on Student Resources. But I'm going to focus in on one of the projects that looked at population-based HIV impact assessment survey data analysis. This was done in Mozambique. It was a 6-month internship focusing on data analysis, data management, informatics, and strategic information. Given the context of the COVID epidemic, this was done remotely. We were looking for students with statistical analysis experience, data, SAS, R, GIS, and other analytical software, and any experience writing research publications was considered a plus. The internship focused on supporting the FIA project's data management team on the return of results, data cleaning, investigation of new technologies, documentation and analysis of the data collected through these surveys. I did not describe for you that the population-based HIV impact assessments are household-based, nationally representative surveys. In Mozambique, the survey included 11,000 households, so clearly this is a very large amount of data and allows us to take a very close look at the status of the HIV epidemic in a given country, in this case in Mozambique, and to understand the success of the Ministry of Health's response to the epidemic. Another project I wanted to describe for you, that coincidentally was in Mozambique, was a project led by a student that compared program data with population-based survey data, and that resulted in a publication shown here in the middle of the slide. It was in AIDS Care now a few years ago. And in this student-led project, Stephanie Kajowski analyzed data from HIV testing and counseling facilities in Mozambique with data from an earlier HIV-focused household-based survey conducted in Mozambique. And she used program to population ratios to identify subgroups from the HIV-positive population who were underrepresented in the HIV testing and counseling setting. And here is a snapshot of some of her results. This example shows how those over the age of, those within the age group of 25 and 39 were overrepresented in HIV testing settings, which is what's shown along the y-axis, and that those over the age of 50 were underrepresented in these HIV testing program populations. Any group under the line is underrepresented, any group over the line is overrepresented. And this very clearly and quantitatively highlighted how programs needed to focus testing campaigns on older adults. Now, the last example I want to describe for you is a data fusion project that I am working on with a student, a doctoral student in epidemiology, and this is looking at the fusion of population-based surveys, and it's focusing on the impact of treat all on population-level viral suppression. So as background, many population-based health surveys exist, but only part of the data collected in each survey is able to be fully analyzed. Analyses that pull from two or more surveys, so cross-survey analyses are very rare. Pooled analyses tend to be very disease-specific, and there are few interdisciplinary attempts to integrate the survey data. This means that there are knowledge gaps and missed opportunities for using the survey data for. So the objective in this project is to develop a method to systematically fuse data from two or more distinct population-based surveys to conduct cross-survey analyses. And as an example, we're using publicly available data from the Lesotho population-based HIV impact assessment, or FIA, from 2016, and the Lesotho Demographic and Health Survey, or DHS, that was conducted in 2014. We want to compare the distribution of HIV RNA, and I'll refer to that as viral load, among HIV-positive adults between 2014 and 2016, which corresponds to the period before and after the initiation of what is referred to as universal treat all. In other words, any person who is identified as being HIV positive should immediately be treated. That was a policy change that went into effect in approximately 2015 to 2016. The challenge here is that different kinds of samples were collected and different lab methods were used with different lower limits of detection. Namely, in DHS, dried blood samples were collected, In the FIA survey, plasma samples were, collected. Plasma is considered the gold standard for viral load measurement. So in our analysis, differences are associated with, any differences associated with viral load collected through a dried blood sample are assumed to be due to measurement error. And we plan to use a constrained iterative conditional imputation method and an external calibration data set to correct for the measurement error. The outcomes that we expect to have at the end of this analysis is the overall proportion and the change in the proportion of the population virally suppressed before and after the true fall recommendation. And we're targeting the emerging infectious diseases journal. And here is a diagram showing you the proposed data structure. Along the top row, you can see elements within the FIA data set, and on the bottom row, elements within the DHS data set. So these first two blue boxes show you demographic and clinical variables that both surveys have in common. Then over here on your right side, FIA collected viral load through plasma, but really did not use dried blood spots to a significant extent. The DHS survey collected dried blood spots for viral load, but really did not collect plasma. The research team includes Dominique Reed, who is the graduate student in epidemiology, who is doing this work, Dr. Shishwam Chen from the Department of Biostatistics at Maryland, and Yuan Ziyu, who is a student in biostatistics also at Maryland. So thank you for your attention, and close here.
Okay, so this is a different example from completely different setting, but as you saw, it's also a calibration problem in a way. And there is a gold standard, the plasma-based data, and the dried blood samples data, which is kind of lesser quality. And you have missing, on one way or the other. Right? So the issue is really, similar in that sense. The other one is the harmonization across different sample survey results that use different instruments. So many elements in terms of data harmonization, because as you deal with big data and if you want to string things together, you have to pay attention to the inconsistencies in the data, because they are not going to be of comparable quality or even comparable periods, right? So anyway, so I'll stop here and reflections. I'm sure many of you have worked with the HS data in other settings. Any comments? I think everyone is tired. Any reflections, any questions? So another element that's going to, kind of show itself at some point is this issue of survey data science. In fact, as you saw in the last acknowledgement, Jessica is of course part of the team, as you know, but Shishwan Chen is the other data scientist who will be more active in year 2 and 3. And I think she's, the plan is actually for her to develop a survey data science short course as well. That's going to be professionally recorded, but she's going to be one of the mentors at least in year 2 or 3, depending on the funding period. And she has been active with the curriculum discussions to some extent. So that is also something that's going to come eventually.
Here's, so Jessica talked about ICAP's next generation internship opportunities. Is that just for Columbia students, or would that be open to our trainees, like our master's students?
That's a question we can ask her. My understanding is actually, I think her purpose here is just to show what a typical practicum project would look like. But my guess is, if we teach it the right way and if there are, the right projects, I think it would be open to in-country master's level students. So it could be a basis for a practicum project for some of our master's students. If not this kind of structure, something else. But the whole point that they are partner project is because they are interested in using the students, but our students also using their data resources. So the answer is yes, at least as far as I can tell. Okay. Any questions? So we have to make a strategic decision. We can still talk about the geo-health, but I'm seeing like blank stares. Everyone is kind of, so should we stop here, or should we go on and discuss geo-health?
One thought is that, I know we won't, well, I'm not sure exactly who's going to be in attendance tomorrow. Patrick will know who from the youth. Patrick, is it just the U of N, FADST investigators present tomorrow, or is it all of your collaborators?
Yes, I would assume all the ones present today will be available tomorrow. There may be 2 or 3 people who are not here today because of classes and exams. Okay. We had data yesterday. Right. We look forward to meeting in the evening. Right. And I hope you will join us. Okay. So because of the local situation kind of dynamics, the numbers will keep on changing, but I expect slightly more. Okay. Yes, more than this by another 3 or 4 guys. Okay. Yes.
So Chris, my thought is since people are tired and we all have a dinner a bit later, maybe we postpone the last presentation until tomorrow morning. We have kind of a reflection time that I think we could use, and I'd love to, I know people have worked on slides, and I think it would be really great to hear about it. And since mostly this group will be together tomorrow, I think we can extend the short course a little bit.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. I think we should be able to find at least another 20 minutes or something, or half an hour at some point.
Are you free tomorrow?
Bella, are you happy or not?
For the morning,
I'll be happy to share tomorrow morning, early morning.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Then why don't we do that? Then, all right. So I think we'll all be together tomorrow as well. So I don't think there is anything more to say today, frankly.
Do you have a projector, Patrick, in the space that we can use tomorrow?
Yes.
Oh, perfect.
All right.
How many do you need?
One projector.
I would like my own projector, please. I'm going to have a competing short course in the morning.
So we have 2 more things on my agenda for today. One is a photo, and the other is the certificate ceremony.
Both very important.
Yes.
Oh, you want to do certificates first?
Or is there anything else, Kira?
I think that's it.
Okay, yeah, certificates, and then we can do the photo with the certificates. Oh my God.
So maybe I think the best thing to do is both of you.
Do you want to do the announcement and I can hang off?
One of you take the photo.
Sure.
I think probably it's better here. So let's have the camera on that.
So this is not my first short course, but this is the first short course that I've done where we're handing out certificates. I'm very excited about this, but please bear with me if I make any rookie mistakes in handing out certificates. All right.
So we're going to collect data on how many of the names are outside of the confidence interval.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So I guess our plan, we're going to call folks up, we'll hand off a certificate. I don't know, Tiffany, if you're taking pictures. We have pictures, this is going to be fantastic. All right, so first, Agacho, you want to come on up? Congratulations. Winderson. Congratulations.
If you could get closer.
Sorry,
So that you give them time to take a picture.
Getacho?
Hold on. For the next ones, I think you should hold the, you usually have one, and then once they get it, at least they should pose with the.
I don't have enough hands to make that work.
Once they receive,
okay.
Then some, start.
Rahel, you're next. Come
Getting right. Hold on, we're going to get it right. Hold on. So I don't know what I'm supposed to do now.
What are we doing? Give it to her, and then,
You can see? Yeah. It's because I was a special assistant.
You did such a great job.
So many computers.
Isaac. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yes.
Davis.
So you have a picture, right?
I do. I have your picture.
Because I'm so bad at this. I haven't done this hair. And we have to do this at work.
Thank you.
Evans. I'm sure we're going to get one of these exactly right.
We just need a few practice rounds. Okay, hold on.
Jared.
Backwards.
You should do only this. It's very deep and so.
Ida.
So, here we are. Good. Thank you. Good. Thank you.
Bilal.
You did so much.
or watching what was going on.
He's very good at receiving a certificate. That was very good.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Otieno. Yes.
For a Zoom for 45 minutes.
Thank you very much. Congratulations. Yes. Thank you. Great.
That's thank you all. Good job, guys. So how's picture of you? Your photo?
So let's come take a photo. Bring your certificate.
Oh my God.
Should we put our banner back behind?
Yeah. They're probably going to make the other banner as well.
Oh, okay. Do you want to bring the big one?
Yeah.
Sure. So let's do that first thing, yeah.
We agree what time we are meeting over there. Because we meet first in the hotel. So, yeah. That's what time it is now.
I think it's going to be 5 by the time we leave. Because it's almost like 15 minutes.
It's gonna be at 6, but we need the hotel at 6:30 because another okay, but we can meet at 6:30. Okay, let's do that. Yeah, 6:30.
6:30 and meet at 7.
Yeah, at what? I think that they are leaving by 6:45. I mean, it's a very short distance.
It's only short distance.
It's only that
The traffic shut out.
and then it gets shut out.
By very little. 6 years, yeah. But you know, you should find us there. You should be the first one there.
Yeah, so for me, I want to be at 5. Yeah, that I
know the direction. Yeah, they find us there.
And then I just ensure that
They're ready for us.
Yeah.
But then you have to leave, right, and come back at 7:30?
No. We will stay.
Rachel should be there. I can be the paparazzi.
Please.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Good talk. Oh, good talk.
Professor Kiros, please come and join us.
No.
Is it tricky?
Okay, every 1, 2, 3.
Thank you.
So let's all go to the stage now.
I'm
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, obviously. I just don't know much about it.
You know, it just takes a while as we're hoping to wrap up. So let's, yeah, some can stand up there. Sure.
ፎቶግራፍ እንደዚህ አይነት ለመነሳት ትሰለፍና በቁመት ትሰለፍና መጀመሪያ ሁሉም ሰው በቁመት
I think we're okay without it, so.
I just go
yeah,
a little bit shorter one.
Yeah, I think the certificate holder should go in the front.
Okay.
Yeah, like the tall people with no certificate or certificates can be second row. Okay, can you come up?
You better get up front.
Hello.
Okay, so you're already.
Okay, so is it safe to be here? Very short to be.
You should come out. Where these guys come? Davis?
So let me be here. That case, right, get with the short, right? The one here. Right, the certificate is upside down.
Or sideways?
It looks very nice.
You come. Yeah.
You see the 6D?
Now I know. This way. Not this side.
We're missing someone.
Okay, Martha, Ida. Oh, I have my mask on.
So this is the first chord, right? For the short term.
For the short course, yeah.
Smile. Smile.
Chapati.
Yeah. Just 1 second.
So it means that the training has taken place.
Hold on. My break on here.
You didn't
The way you're holding it looks like a police watch shot.
Martha, you can join us. You can come. You have taken enough.
Don't you this?
Chapati.
Yeah, you look down one.
Can you get all of us?
Another one. Okay.
It
needs to.
Thank you.
Cheese.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Let me make this announcement.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so from here, the van will go to the hotel and leave the hotel at 6:30. So those who are going direct to Cephas in Hurlingham can proceed from here. So we have agreed that at exactly 7 p.m. the dinner will start. So those people who are not going to the hotel, you can drive straight to Hurlingham and you will find some of us there. Of course, there will be something to do as we wait for the guests.
You're not saying what, right?
The QQ plot will be there. Yeah, so look forward to seeing you there. Then those who are missing, the Kenyans who are missing their families will see their families after the dinner. So please, let's all go there. You are all invited. Thank you.
So Patrick, can we join you for something to do instead of going to hotel?
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
You know who's supposed to be
Sorry. Yeah, but
oh yeah, we should also
yeah, that's right.
That coming was that?
Where is this file? The way you look between